The Flyers, Penguins, Blue Jackets, and Islanders are battling to improve this year in the Metro. We'll talk about which team has the best chances to make it and why. All that and a lot more on our special season preview edition on the Locked On NHL podcast.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network's 2025 NHL season preview. Your team every day.
I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. Welcome to this special Metro Division playoff hopeful season preview. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who made this season preview your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode of your favorite team's show. With me today, Jay Foster from Locked On Blue Jackets, Russ Cohen from Locked On Flyers, and Hunter Hodes from Locked On Penguins, as these four teams here kind of fighting to get back into playoff contention. And guys, Jay, let's start with you. As far as this upcoming season is concerned, what reasons are there for optimism for the Columbus Blue Jackets?
I mean, where do you start, right? Like, am I biased? Maybe a little bit, yeah. But the future for the Blue Jackets is so bright. Like, they spent the entire month of March finding every possible way to just not score a goal at all and still only miss the playoffs by 2 points. Now, partially that was because they went on that insane 6-game winning streak at the end of the season to kind of fix the fact that the month of March was such a disaster. But like, you look at the roster, like all of their key pieces, like Zach Werenski, I think is the oldest key piece on this team, and he's 28. You know, Adam Fantilli turns 21 next month. Kent Johnson's 22. Cole Sillinger's 22. Denton Matejchuk's 20. Kromachenko, who had 31 goals last season and is getting paid basically nothing for the privilege, is 25 years old. Like, all of these key pieces are still so young that there's really no reason to look at this team and think they should. Will they be better than last year? Maybe, but I don't think there's any reason to look at this team and say this team is going to be worse than last year.
Russ, how about you with the Flyers? Reasons for optimism as we head into the season.
Yeah, they picked up Dan Vladar to kind of help their backup goalie issue because they definitely hemorrhaged some points for that. You know, Matvei Michkov in another year presumably will not have a sophomore jinx. Tyson Forster now to start the season healthy, where there was worries that he wouldn't because he had this weird thing going on. So he's okay. Maybe Jet Luchenko makes the team. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gets sent to juniors. Maybe he doesn't, but people are at least excited. He didn't play in rookie camp, so now everybody's kind of like, well, when are we going to see Jet Luchenko? But there's still reason for optimism there. They picked up Christian Dvorak. That's another good center that he could win faceoffs for them, and that's a big deal. They also got guys like Noah Juleson, Dennis Gilbert to kind of go around the edges. And then Trevor Zegras, they hope for him to be a 2C. Either way, he's going to add offense. So in that regard, they should be better than last year, and the power play has to be better. It really can't be worse.
Hunter, how about you? What are the reasons for optimism in Pittsburgh right now?
Well, mainly the core players. Like, they're still here, which is always good. Sidney Crosby has 3 straight 90-plus point seasons. He's going to be 38 this year. I know you see all those rumors about his future and all that. I don't believe that garbage. I still think he's going to retire here. It's his call, but he's never shown any inclination, that he wants to leave. So I don't think that's going to happen. Evgeny Malkin, this might be his last season in the NHL. He's going to want to try to go out with as big of a bang as he wants. Chris Letang is still here. They didn't trade Erik Karlsson, at least not yet, though that might happen at the trade deadline. And then some of the younger pieces, Rutger McGroarty had a nice little stint to end last season. That was his second stint in the NHL. Looked like a completely different player compared to what we saw at the beginning of the season. Ville Koivunen, the same thing. He looked like he was NHL ready, almost a point per game at the end of the season when he came up with McGroarty. And, we're going to try to see if Harrison Brunig makes this team out of camp, but I think with the logjam on the right side, it's probably going to be back to juniors unless the NHL and the CHL can agree on the AHL rule, but it looks like that's probably not going to happen over the next few weeks just because the CHL they're being babies about it. They don't want to try to adapt to the whole situation here. So, those are, I guess, some reasons. They signed Parker Weatherspoon over the offseason to try to fill a void on the left side. You bring in mean, Connor Clifton, Matt Dumbo, those are just players that you can flip. I do like the Anthony Mantha signing, though. That's kind of the Beauvillier replacement, where if you get 15, 20 plus goals, you can maybe get a second round pick from him at the deadline like they did for Anthony Beauvillier. But, though outside of that, I wouldn't say there's that much optimism, though I will say there is a brand new coaching staff in place, so fresh ideas, fresh innovation. That's also something I'm looking forward to for this season.
And, for the Islanders, I mean, you got to start with Matthew Schaefer, first overall pick. Whether he'll spend more than 9 games in the NHL this year or not remains to be seen. We got to see how he looks in preseason, in camp, and in those first 9 games. And then, number 2, I think you still have Ilya Sorokin, a top goalie. That should keep the Islanders in many games. And you got to hope, from an Islanders perspective, that the injury luck is even a little bit better than last year, where Matthew Barzal only played 30 games. You had 3 left shot defensemen out of your lineup at the same time. If the Islanders can be healthier, they certainly should be better than they were last year. And then obviously, I think the change from Lou Lamoriello to Matthew Darche, just giving the overall franchise a greater sense of optimism for the future. They had 3 first-round picks this year. You add some guys like Jonathan Drouin and Emil Heineman. Hopefully this team can be more competitive in 2025, 2026 than they were a year ago. Wanted to take a look or discuss some of our odds here from FanDuel, team by team. Jay, let's start with you. The over-under on points for the Blue Jackets, 84.5. How do you feel about that? Is that fair? And where do you think the Jackets will be with regard to that?
I mean, I'm taking the over on that. They finished with 89 points this season. I think that the roster has improved. Not as much as the roster of the teams around them have improved. Like, I think Montreal got a lot better. I think Ottawa is going to continue to be pretty good. Detroit's kind of a wild card if they can figure out how to do anything. But like bringing in a goalie, like I think that's a team that's improved, right? Columbus improved, but not as much as any of those teams, I don't think. But I think it's fair to say that 84.5 feels low to me. I'm kind of looking at them to be about a 90-point team. I would love for them to hit 45 wins. I think that feels very doable. A lot of question marks with this team. Goaltending, their offense was probably unsustainably good last season. They were one of the best 5-on-5 scoring teams in the NHL, though. So, there's reason to think that this team is going to be just as good as they were last year, maybe a little bit better. I don't know that 90 points gets them into the playoffs, but I do think that 84.5 feels low, especially when you look at, and no offense, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, but you look at, teams like Philly are sitting at only a couple of expected points below that. And, we'll get into to Philly's over-unders in a second here, but Columbus feels more than 3 standings points better than the Flyers this season.
Russ, you mentioned the Flyers. Let's segue into that. It's at 81.5 points for them. Do you think that's fair? And do you think we're looking at over or under that number?
It's fair. I mean, they have a new coach in Rick Tocchet. They've lost Rocky Thompson off the power play. Sorry, Gil, which is a positive. Good luck in Bridgeport.
You'll need
and
it.
So, yeah, Bridgeport needs a lot.
I mean, he couldn't be worse.
No, Bridgeport could not be worse. That's true. No, there's no question about that. I actually think I would take the over, but would only be by a half a point. I think 82 might be their number. I think, unfortunately, what's going to happen is I think there's going to be so much parity in the Metro that I think Jay's right in the over for Columbus, but I don't think it's much over. And I think we'll find out from Hunter, but I think the bottom could be worse than the bottom that FanDuel has set up. And if that's the case, then there's a few other points to go around.
Hunter, FanDuel has the Penguins at 74.5. That's the lowest here. Your thoughts on that number? Is it fair? And where do you think the Penguins will be in relation to it?
I do think it's fair. I'd go a little bit over right now just because all the 3 players that were involved in trade rumors over the summer, Raquel, Rust, and Carlson, they were not traded. Cam Startson literally 4 days. I don't think that's going to change by the time camp starts. I don't think any of those three are going to be traded before the start of the season. Now, during the season, that can change. If one or two of them get traded by the trade deadline, then okay, we might have a discussion about them potentially finishing bottom 5. But right now, I'd go a little bit over. They finished with 80 points last season. It's kind of where I see them right now anyway. Like, kind of like 75, 80. But if I had to pick over or under, I'd go over a little bit right now, just because those three players are still on the roster. Sidney Crosby is still very, very good. I think you're going to get a little bit of a better version of Evgeny Malkin this year with better line mates. TBD on Chris Letang. The goaltending is not going to be good. Everyone knows that. The defense is not going to be very good. Their best defensive player on the left side is Parker Weatherspoon. He's a third pairing defenseman on a contending team. He's probably going to have to get top pairing minutes with Erik Karlsson this year just because they're not trying to win. But I think 74.5 to 80 is totally fair, but I'd go a little over right now just because they haven't made any big moves yet.
All right. My Islanders, FanDuel has us at 82.5. I think that's a fair number as well. Again, health is going to have a lot to do with it. The Islanders still have a lot of 30-plus players, guys on the wrong side of 30. That usually does mean more injuries and a little longer to recover from them when they do happen. For the Islanders, I think it's a question of health, and then it's a question of they have a lot of guys who are on the wrong side of 30. They have a lot of guys who are on the younger side, not a lot of guys in that prime middle of their career. Maybe, 3, maybe 4 guys who sort of fit that description on the whole roster. Bo Horvat, Matthew Barzal, not a lot. So to me, I'm looking at over 82.5, but not by necessarily a lot.
Gil, if I could add one thing, I like Siplikov a lot. I think there is an upside for him. I don't know about Shabanov. He is kind of small. Like, I don't know what he's going to do. But Siplikov, I do think with a year under his belt, could really add some offense.
I hope so. I mean, he had 10 goals last year. I mentioned on Locked On Islanders, I think he's capable of 20. Whether or not that happens this year or not remains to be seen. We've got a lot more to discuss on this show. We'll talk about each team's biggest addition. We've got that and more coming up on this special Metro preview next. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And if you and your significant other share expenses, this is a great way to stay on the same page. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, guys, let's go team by team. We'll talk about the single biggest offseason addition. Let's do it in reverse order this time. So, Hunter, we'll start with you.
See, I've been going back and forth on this. I'd probably go Anthony Mantha, though, for forwards, just because, he's going to get a lot of time in the top 9 this year. I think they're going to alternate him on the third line, second line with Evgeny Malkin. He's coming off ACL surgery, but he has said he's going to be ready for training camp this week. Before that, he had a 23-goal season during the 23-24 season. I'm not saying he's going to hit that with the Penguins, but again, if he can give them 15, 20 goals, potentially get them a solid return to the trade deadline, I think that's a pretty good success. I really like that signing during free agent frenzy. If I wanted to add another one, I'd go Parker Weatherspoon, just because he is an upgrade over some of the options they had last year on the left side. He's going to get a lot of NHL minutes this year. Again, I think they have no choice but to put him on the top pairing on the left side. He's good defensively, good skater. A lot of stuff they didn't have on the left side on their top pairing, especially last year. They're gonna have no choice but to play him with Erik Karlsson. So, but Anthony Mantha is probably the biggest one so far in an offseason where they weren't that aggressive. They made some moves, but again, it's obvious they're not trying to win this year as they continue to rebuild as quickly as possible.
Russ, how about over in Philly? Biggest offseason acquisition, and how do they help the team?
Yeah, it's Trevor Zegras. I mean, 24. He's a couple years removed from all those highlight goals, and he used to be a guy that scored in the 60s. Last year, he was in the 30s, but he'll bring offense to this team. I don't know exactly who he's going to play with. Will he play with Matvei Michkov? I'm not sure. On the power play, sure, he's certainly going to help that. I mean, I could see him getting 50, 55 points. The key is whether he gets him at center or on the wing. He'll probably start off at center. So that's a big deal for Philly because they need the Flyers need help up the middle, and he would provide a lot of that. Dan Vladar would be the other one because as a competent backup, that's a big deal for Flyers because they just kept rotating backups last year, and it just nobody really ever caught fire or even had consistency going for him. So Vladar will give him that. He's still a guy that you're still not sure what he can do, so there's still upside with him.
Fair enough. Jay, how about you? The Blue Jackets' biggest offseason acquisition, and where do they fit in, and how do they help?
Man, I considered cheating with this because I do think that the beauty of the Blue Jackets offseason was that they mostly kept the pieces that they needed to keep, right? Like we don't need to get into the Ivan Provorov contract. Don't worry about it. But like re-signing Dante Fabro, to me, was essential for this team because that's the first consistent defense partner that Zach Werenski's had since Seth Jones left in 2021, which sounds insane when you look at it that way. But they brought in Charlie Coyle, who I like a lot. They wanted a right-handed center. They wanted some depth to kind of shore up the bottom six. Sometimes you need to add an adult to the mix. Blue Jackets are very young. I don't love the return for Coyle. I don't love that they had to bring Miles Wood in. I don't love that they lost Gavin Brindley, who was one of my favorite Blue Jackets prospects. But in a vacuum, I like the addition of Charlie Coyle. I think he'll solidify the bottom six. I think he'll be good on the penalty kill. I think he will be good at faceoffs because right now we have Sean Monahan that takes faceoffs and everyone else is just kind of there because all of our centers are 5 minutes old. So I like the addition of Coyle. I didn't love the trade, but I really liked the actual addition in a vacuum.
I always like Charlie Coyle. He's one of those guys that I don't think fans appreciate until they see him every day. And when he's on your team and you're watching him every game, you realize how valuable he can be.
He's a younger Brock Nelson, but not much younger. They're probably the same age. Who knows?
Yeah, he's 32, 33. I think
Nelson's, I think, a little older. So,
so
he is younger, barely.
But like
you're not bringing Charlie Coyle in to be a difference maker, right? You're bringing him in to get 30 points and to play on the penalty kill and to win face-offs. So if that's what he does, then I am more than okay with it. I
think Fantilli is going to get at least 35 goals. He might get more. He might.
We're hoping 40, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we're knocking on wood.
We'll see. For the Islanders, there's two possibilities. I could go with Matthew Schaefer, but I'm still not sure whether he's going to stay for the entire season. But what he adds, certainly hope for the future more than anything else. The Islanders have not really had an elite defenseman. I mean, you want to say Mark Streit was elite. He was probably a level below elite. One of the very good but not elite type players. You got to go back a long way for the Islanders. Dennis Potvin, the last defenseman they drafted with the first overall pick. So, I think Schaefer adds that sense of optimism, that sense of hope, but I don't know how much he'll contribute this year, where even if he makes the team, he's probably a third pair defenseman and a second power play guy initially. And then we see where, how quickly he makes the adjustment.
I can add this for Schaefer because I ran into him at the rookie showcase.
Yeah.
I did ask him about the lineup. Does he care where he plays in the lineup as long as he plays? And he's willing to work up from the bottom. So if he's on your third pair, that's fine. I mean, if he makes it, that's probably what they should do with him.
Yeah, I agree.
I do have a hot take about Schaefer, which is that they absolutely should send him back to the OHL. Because I look at Aaron Ekblad, who was absolutely rushed to the NHL. Aaron Ekblad could have been a fantastic, maybe not Cale Makar level defenseman, but Aaron Ekblad could have been so good. And they rushed an 18-year-old onto a very bad Florida Panthers team, and I think it stunted his development. And I think that if they're not careful, you'll see the same thing with Schaefer in New York. So if you ask me, send him back to Erie and keep him there.
I don't think that's a hot take. Like, I'm all for sending a guy back, but like Gil said, give him the 9 games. You drafted him where you drafted him. That's fine.
Yeah. And then the other alternative, if we're not going Matthew Schaefer, would be Jonathan Drouin, who they got in the Brock Nelson trade. Who they signed as a free agent. And, it's a low risk 2-year, $8 million total deal. If he's healthy, he certainly can contribute. Has he stayed healthy throughout his career? Absolutely not. So, if they can get 70 games plus out of Jonathan Drouin, he has the speed and to help out on the power play, to maybe keep up with somebody like Matthew Barzal if they team him with him. He has probably good chemistry with Bo Horvat. So I'm interested in seeing what he will bring to the table. Again, the key is how many games do they get out of him over the course of the season.
I mean, I think just having Barzal is going to help their power play. Like, I feel like Noah Dobson suffered when Barzal was out, and fans were just kind of like, Noah Dobson's not as good anymore. But it's like a lot of players suffered with Matt Barzal out, right? I mean,
Matt Barzal was the guy who carried the puck up ice on the power play, even though he was a forward.
Right.
And I think Noah Dobson's vision on the power play is average. It's not terrible, but it's not as good as you would like it to be for a top power play quarterback. And without Barzy, he definitely struggled a lot more. So be interesting to see how that plays out. Now it's going to be Tony DeAngelo on the top power play probably to start the season.
It'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I've heard of the guy. That's all I could say.
Yeah, I know. I mean, with DeAngelo on ice, sticking to on ice, the thing about DeAngelo that worries me more is defense. His offensive ability is not very much in question.
No, I mean, he could skate. He's still going to score some points. Will he get along with the Russians? We'll see.
That's another question for another day. All right, we have got more to talk about right now. We'll talk about what's at stake if things go south for these teams. We've got all that and more next on today's Locked On NHL Metro Hopeful Preview. All right, so we've talked about some of the reasons for optimism, new additions. What happens with these teams if things do go south? Jay, let's start with you. If things implode in Columbus, what are the consequences?
I mean, this is a weird one, right? Because the Blue Jackets overperformed last year. I think it's fair to say they overachieved. I think, and we talked about this in the last year's preview, actually. I don't know if any of you guys were actually on that one or not, but we basically said no one would blame the Blue Jackets if they just kind of packed it in last season, right? After what happened just before training camp started. And then they came out and they just finished short of the playoffs, right? So it's really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, is that who they are as a team? Do they take steps backward? Do they keep taking steps forward? Missing the playoffs, I think, is not the end of the world. And in fact, I would argue that this team is not arguably not a playoff team. I talked about this on Locked On Blue Jackets, that there's probably going to be 3 playoff teams from the Metro again. So the Blue Jackets are going to have to finish top 3. They're going to have to beat out probably one of Washington or New Jersey to make the playoffs, or potentially the Rangers. So it's going to be interesting, and I don't think that missing the playoffs is bad. The worry is going to be if they do what, frankly, a lot of people expect the Blue Jackets to do, which is revert to type and just go back to being a team that can't get it done. Goaltending falls apart. If Zach Werenski is anything less than, the Norris level defenseman that he was last year, and Fantilli takes a step backwards, because development is not linear. If they get sophomore slumps from a bunch of people, if guys don't stay healthy, health is another big issue for the Blue Jackets. There's a lot of reasons.
Jay, do you think it would affect attendance there? Because I think fans are getting a little itchy with, if they started to fall out of the race, how would that be?
I don't know, because when the year that they drafted, it would have been, I believe, the year that they drafted Fantilli, they were selling out frequently all the way up into April. Okay. And partially that's because what else is there to do in if you want to do a sport in Columbus, you've got the Clippers, you've got the Crew, and you've got the Blue Jackets, right? I think the Blue Jackets are fairly safe.
And
to say
Ohio
they're the
State.
biggest draw.
Ohio State is there, yeah.
Yeah, but usually by April they're not playing football, you know.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. I don't think that missing the playoffs is the end of the world. My worry is that many things go wrong all at once because I'm a Blue Jacket fan and have been conditioned to just assume the worst at all times. And, you know, I don't think they're going to be a lottery team this year. I think a lot of things would have to go wrong for that. But I could see them taking steps backwards. And I don't know how well that would sit with the fans, with the organization. You know, they didn't set themselves up to take huge steps forward this offseason. But there's a lot of they're betting on themselves to, you know, okay, there was a lot of fans that were frustrated that they didn't bring in Mitch Marner or Brock Besser or Nikolai Ehlers or whoever you want, right? They're betting on themselves. They're betting on their young guys to get better. And so as long as the young guys continue to get better, I think that's everything is A-okay. You know, obviously you don't want to be a lottery team, but missing the playoffs is not the be-all and end-all, in my opinion.
All right, Russ, how about in Philly?
Yeah, Philly talked about it just a week ago in a press conference that, hey, they're trying to make steps. They want to see improvement in young players. But if they miss the playoffs, it is not the end of the world. They understand where they are. Fans are excited about Matvei Michkov, so their season ticket base is still really good. Could attendance be better? Yeah, attendance could be better in Philly, and maybe if there's an uptick, it will be. I think with Rick Tocchet at the beginning, new coach, I think there'll be a nice uptick at the beginning for them. But if not, listen, I don't think they're going to be in the McKenna sweepstakes exactly like the Penguins will be, but they could talk about that. But I do think that there is a chance, and they didn't really want to sell off this trading deadline. Like Keith Jones doesn't really want to do that. He talked about that, but if they're forced with it, there's a couple of guys that they could do that with. So yeah, they're trying to make steps forward. I don't think, they're necessarily a playoff team. I don't, but they can be better. And if the young guys show improvement, that's what the fans are really looking for, because they do have a lot of young players. They do have a bright future, and that's what they're working with.
Hunter, it's a little different in Pittsburgh because you do have veterans like Crosby and Malkin and Letang who have a great legacy and are trying to sort of go out on a high note. And yet at the same time, you're retooling or rebuilding. So if the Penguins have another rough season, what does that do for the franchise?
Well, obviously, if they miss the playoffs, which I think is pretty likely, they're not trying to contend this year. What's at stake? Obviously, Gavin McKenna, if they fall into a lottery position, big trades. Kyle Dubas is not going to be afraid to make big trades around the trade deadline. We all know Erik Karlsson is still here, Rickard Rakell, Brian Russ, but I would not expect all three of those guys to be here after the trade deadline. In fact, I would say it's pretty unlikely that all three will be here. I think at least one of those guys, if not two, will be gone. If I had to pick one that will still be here, it's Brian Rush, because he's a big leader on that team. He's well respected in the locker room. When the big three, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, don't want to talk to the media, it's usually Brian Russ that does it, just because he's been there for so long. If you want to talk even more worst case, Sidney Crosby goes to management and says, hey, I don't really want to be here anymore during this time because I want to win. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I know what Pat Brisson said this week. I know what Sidney Crosby said this week, but he hasn't gotten there yet. I think his focus right now is on helping the Penguins and retiring here. And if that changes, then they'll have to have a discussion. There's obviously an ownership situation here that we have to watch. The FSG might be trying to get out here before the season. The Hoffman family is trying to buy the team for almost $2 billion. So we have to see what happens on with that. But in terms of, if they miss the playoffs, no one's going to be surprised. Kyle Dubas is probably going to say the same thing he said last offseason, where we know no one's picking us, but we want to see how the young players produce. We want to see how the new coaching staff gets in. And, that's really all there is to it with the Penguins. Again, expectations are not high again this year. If maybe next year, if they're able to get some lottery luck, even if they don't win the McKenna sweepstakes, I think Verhoff is right up there. I think he could potentially go number 2, in my opinion. And I think I see him as a franchise type player. Mm-hmm. That draft is a lot deeper than this year's draft. Even outside of McKenna, who's a generational talent, there's about 3 to 4 other players who I think could be franchise players if they develop properly. So that's how I see it.
Makes sense. And as far as the Islanders are concerned, we have a new GM. I don't think there's a lot of pressure to win right away. The ownership and the front office are still saying, yeah, we think this team can make the playoffs. What are they going to say? I mean, they're trying to sell tickets. if everything breaks right, if they stay very healthy, if certain guys take a step forward, could they sneak into one of the last playoff spots? Possibly. I think it's a little bit of a long shot, but I think what would happen to the Islanders if this team either misses the playoffs or really implodes and has a really bad season is you accelerate the retool. JG Pageau is going to probably be traded by the deadline anyway. But if things really go south, maybe you also trade Anders Lee. Maybe you trade either Ryan Pollock or Adam Pelech. You start moving out some of those bad contracts that Lou left the Islanders with and start accelerating that retool, add more picks, add more prospects, maybe some younger NHL players, and take that next step forward. I think the playoffs are less likely than not likely, but if they don't make it, I don't think anyone is on the hot seat unless Patrick Roy loses the locker room and the team just falls apart. Then he may be on the hot seat, but I still think he has a little while to go before that happens.
Well, the good news is that Patrick Roy is famously even-tempered and chill at all times.
Although, listen, he surprised me last year. I thought he would get fed up last year, and he didn't. So I kind of think now Darch is going to, give him some energy.
I'm just excited for the 7-minute goalie pools. Just give me more of those, please.
Benefiting goals for opponents everywhere. Yeah.
I will say about the Islanders is that they're maybe the weirdest team in the Metro.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really have no idea what's going to happen with
You can make an argument both ways for them.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
They very well could be a playoff team, or they could be the worst team in the division.
Agree.
And there's genuinely no way to know which way it's going to go until that's the way it's gone. So I'm going to be
I always say the Islanders are like cockroaches. Like every time you think they're gone, they just come right back. So I just don't really know. Like, we'll have to see what happens.
A backhanded compliment to the New York Islanders by Hunter Hodes. Well, guys, thank you so much for hopping on. This has been a lot of fun. I want to thank everyone here for making the Locked On Metro Hopefuls preview your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no offseason. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. You can find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Gil Martin on behalf of Jay Foster, Russ Cohen, and Hunter Hodes. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks so much for watching and listening to the NHL Metro Hopefuls preview.